This week, I feel like I've had so many questions and conversations about grey hair. Now, for a long time it was taboo, and now it's a really open topic and so many people are embracing their grey hair, which I love. But it makes me realise how much misinformation is out there about what causes grey hair, what it is, and what's involved when it comes to managing it. In this video, I'll talk about the truth about exactly what grey hair is and its characteristics, how grey hair can vary from person to person, and what you need to consider when more grey hair starts growing in. There's also a part 2 of this video coming where I'll talk in more detail about how to manage your greys throughout your life. So what is grey hair? Now, it's interesting to know first of all that there is nothing grey about grey hair. Now, I know that might sound strange, but let me explain what I mean. You might have noticed that people that you know have different types of grey. You might have an older relative who has a really soft white beigey kind of colour, and you might have others that have that really kind of charcoaly salt and pepper colour. All of those heads of hair share something, and that is the strands that begin growing without any colour in them at all. There is no grey part of any of their hair. So what happens when we go grey is that gradually individual follicles stop producing pigment. So that means that mixed up with all your natural colour of hair, you'll start to see a grey hair grow in. It's not grey, it's completely colourless. It has no pigment in there, and so a better description would be translucent. Now, the reason that some people's grey hair looks more white and creamy versus others looking more charcoaly salt and pepper is all to do with the natural colour that those colourless strands are mixed in with. That and the sheer amount of those strands that you have. For the purpose of this video, we'll still refer to those strands as the grey hairs, but it's important that you know it's not a greying of your overall colour, it's a gradual loss of pigment from one follicle at a time. That's why you can notice some areas are whiter and some areas feel darker when it comes to the greyness that you're experiencing overall. If your natural colour is light, if you're a very light brown or a blonde naturally, and especially if you're a natural redhead, as more of those grey hairs grow in, your colour will go whiter, creamier, more beige-like, and you will never get that salt and pepper effect that some people have. That's because there is a lightness and a warmth to the other strands that are mixed in with those white strands, so that when the light filters through your hair, the overall appearance is softer and creamier. If your hair is very, very dark and you have those white or grey strands come in, it will feel very hard and cold and charcoal-like. That's where the salt and pepper description term comes in, because it's a mix of what can look like black and white hairs. Unfortunately, you won't have that soft, creamy colour that so many people like, but I think it can look so great when it comes to having shocks of the white next to the really dark, and the mix of those two together I think is really beautiful. In typical human nature, we'll always want what we haven't got, so the first thing is to really understand how your hair is greying and honour exactly how it's greying, work with it rather than fighting against it. So let me explain what you can consider when those grey hairs start growing in, and I'm going to split this into 2 parts. The first part is for those of you that have lighter coloured hair, warmer, lighter tones. When those grey hairs start growing in, the best thing that you can do if you want to incorporate them and work with them is to incorporate some lightness into your hair in the form of some soft kind of highlights. One of the things that I do with my clients is I pick up the area around the grey hair when it's clustering and turn that into a highlight, because suddenly you see the brightness of the highlight rather than those grey hairs. There is nothing wrong with seeing grey hairs, and if you choose to honour them, I love that. It's absolutely amazing, but this video is for those of you that want to help manage them and work with them in some harmonious way. As more and more grey hair grows in, you might find yourself naturally going lighter with the colour that you choose to have done. And that can be a really good way of keeping the look looking natural and soft over time. If you happen to like your hair coloured darker, you will be fighting against your roots when they grow in, because not only will you get a root from the grey hair, you'll also be getting a root from your natural fairer colour. Nothing wrong with that, but it does require more salon visits and more maintenance. So what about if your hair is very dark? This is a question I get a lot, and it does take a more skilled colorist to work around this. If you want to embrace the grey hair that you have and you have very dark hair, I still advise that you work with some kind of highlighting situation to blend them away. But it all depends on how your grey is scattered through your hair. For some people, and in my opinion these are the lucky ones because it does make it easier to work with, if your grey hair is clustering around the front of your hairline but most of the back of your hair is still dark, it's a really nice look to start highlighting around the face, whether that be a softer lighter brown or whether you go for a brighter blonde colour. You can install those highlights in a way that blends seamlessly from lightest at the front to darkest at the back. You don't need to have the same colour all over your hair. But as I say, it does take the eye of a skilled colorist to do this and to place those highlights in a way that looks really seamless. When the majority of your hair is still dark, it can be quite easy to paint those grey hairs away with a permanent color and cover them up completely. The more hair you get, I advise that you go for a more translucent coverage. So that's using a type of hair color that's going to reduce the brightness of the grey hairs, but not necessarily designed to make them match your natural dark color. It just reduces the contrast between the colorless strands and the darker strands to give you something that looks more harmonious but still has lovely highs and lows and dimension in it. Now this will require maintenance, but as the root grows in it will be less harsh than if you were having that opaque solid color put on all over your hair. So when you have very dark hair but the majority of your hair has turned white or grey, it's actually a really interesting time, because if you were ever to be interested in going blonde, platinum blonde, or a really bright color of some kind, if you do that, you will suddenly feel that rather than your roots growing in grey, they'll feel as though they grow in darker. Now, a dark root on lighter hair I think can look quite cool some of the time. And so when you're naturally very dark but most of your hair's gone white, if you go platinum, which can be really fun and a really fun thing to do at that stage of your life, your roots will be dark and give you this contrast and can actually look really, really youthful if that's something that you're interested in. I want to add here that grey hair can be beautiful, it can look ever so chic, it can be designed by your hairstylist in a really modern, really, really fashionable way, but it will never be your most youthful look. It will never be the look that makes you feel the youngest, and that's maybe not a priority for you. But all I will say is, all the time that looking youthful is your main focus when it comes to your beauty regime and self-care, going grey fully probably isn't for you. When you get to the point where you want to look striking or bold or make a statement or be natural, and that takes priority over youthfulness, it's a really great option to grow out your hair, because natural grey hair is stunning. Hopefully you learned something about your grey hair from this video. Part 2 is coming very soon, where I'll go into more options about how to colour working with the grey hair.